so we're going to start again.
Because basically, nice little rehearsal.
Hi everyone. I am really bad at technology, and basically we've been talking for 7 minutes and I didn't press the go live button.
Oh.
So basically we weren't live, which is great because that means we've practiced a little bit. Amazing. Can someone from the audience just write something in the chat to make sure that I'm doing this right? Because I haven't been doing that before. It says that there's 8 people watching for now. So if anyone can just say hello in the chat and then we'll know that everything's going well, that would be amazing. In the meantime, we're going to start again. And I will introduce the talks and then I will ask you guys to introduce yourselves and your projects. So yes, I am Marta. I'm one of the tutors on Material Futures, and I had the great pleasure of teaching the Material Futures students that just graduated, and they've very kindly asked me to host this series of talks. And yeah, they will be showcasing their graduation projects over the next 5 days. And today we're going to be talking about 3 of the projects that have been focusing around biodesign. So we have Rina, Sarah, and Carolina. And if you want more information, you can always find it on the Dutch Design Week website, where you guys have amazing content and a bit more explanation on your projects. But anyway, let's not delay this any longer. So I'm going to ask you guys to present your projects, a little bit about yourself, and we're going to start with Rina. We're going to go on to Sarah, and then we're going to do Carolina. Over to you.
Okay. Hello. Are you sure it works now?
It is working. Yes, people are commenting.
Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Rina Oon. My background is in luxury leather accessories, design and making. And my final project at Material Futures concentrated on developing animal and plastic-free leather-like material from kombucha SCOBY. So for those who don't know, kombucha is a cold fermented tea drink that grows layers of bacterial cellulose on the surface to protect its food source, which is the sweet sugar tea from the outside world. And I've been collecting it from the breweries around London and reprocessing it into leather-like material. The idea for this direction came from the fact that in recent years I was starting to get more and more vegan clients who were asking for vegan leather products, and it made me think, what is this so-called vegan leather actually made of? Turns out it's really toxic PVC and PU-based plastic, which is very toxic to produce, as well as is very harmful to environment during the decomposition stage, which takes forever. So that, I guess, was the push for me to explore this direction. And as a result, I created a collection of handbags made of this SCOBY compo material that I developed. And the collection explores different ways of working with this material, from traditional stitching to modular tessellation assembly to liquid molding, which is a very interesting and quite unique technique, more similar to like ceramics for making bags. So that's my story in a nutshell. And over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Okay, hi. So I have a background in fashion design, and my final project was looking at exploring a bacterial composite that's inspired by nacre, or mother of pearl, which grows on the inside of the mollusk shell. So this material in nature is super strong, tough, and lightweight. So it's been researched by a lot of material scientists. So my project was exploring recreating this composite from 2 bacterial processes. So one bacteria creates a biopolymer and the other one creates a mineral, and they grow in layers to mimic the nanostructure of the natural nacre. And I envisioned this for use in the sports industry.
Okay, so I am Carolina, and my project is called Biomimicry Strength. And the research of my project is based on nature's system of creating biomaterials. For the topic of my research, I have found the limpet is a mollusk, and the tooth of the limpet is the strongest biomaterial that we know at the moment. So I have explored both the chemical composition as well as the morphology of the material, creating a series of samples to be able to produce them or implement them into other biomaterials that are not as strong.
Amazing. Thank you, guys. Cool. So, I mean, I think the first thing that I would love to start talking to you guys about, and I don't know if whoever's watching this saw the Club Solo editions we did, which were really great. But today, I think instead of asking individual questions about each project, I'm just going to throw different things to you about the topic. And I think it would be really great to get your points of view, because I think you've all treated the topic of biodesign in a very different way. So I think the first one, and it's one that really interests me, is kind of, how do you feel that working with living materials has sort of shifted your practice? So, you know, what have been the challenges of working with live materials instead of working with, let's say, dead materials that you can control a bit more? And also kind of, you know, in the future, if we are designers that are going to be working with these sort of materials, you know, how do we face a future like this? Like, what sort of skills will we need to have, and what skills do we need to learn in order to be able to work with these sort of materials?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I feel it's definitely changed the perspective because it made it much more aware what are the materials made of, because you may not really realize everything that goes into the material when you just take it as a ready-made material and start working with it. So I guess it definitely raised the consciousness in that terms.
And also working with these living systems at home, it's really forced us, I think, to get more resourceful and see equipment that maybe you'd have easy access to in a lab. You're having to recreate it in your home. But I think for the future, like, there's already quite a bit of designers capitalizing on this sort of DIY bio and creating like home kits from research they've done in their own materials, and creating these little kits that people at home can learn how to work with these materials as well. So I think that that's something that's cool going on in the future, in how it's going to change how designers might not be working with living materials right now, but it's kind of going to be like an easier shift into it.
Yeah, and I think it's also very much a collaboration between designers and scientists to develop new materials. Definitely, we don't know like all the science stuff, but I think we as designers can think outside the box and maybe offer some ideas and directions which perhaps are novel or haven't been thought about in the lab before.
Yeah.
Do you feel
some of the materials are like, some things you can totally do at home, like growing mycelium, which I'm sort of experimenting with that right now. Honestly, it's like easier than keeping a plant alive. But some things, like doing some of the material development that I was trying to do for my project at home, like, you really need a lab. So I think there'll be like, there's different levels of what you can do at home by yourself and learning from the internet. And then there's a different level that you need an actual lab and experts, scientists, and things for. So I think there's going to be two sort of sections of exploration for living materials.
Do you feel that it's sort of changed the responsibility you have within the project? So like, I remember, for example, with Carolina, you know, you were working with the limpet's tooth, and there was this like stress about the limpet dying and, like, you know, maintaining things alive, and just, I feel that through the conversations that I've had with you guys throughout the year, I think your perception has really shifted in terms of what your responsibility and what your sort of goal is in the project. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I think the actual role of the designer has completely changed, and what I really love about our course is that is something that is embedded in our careers from now on, and hopefully we can inspire other designers to follow up. But we're facing so many challenges in the world, and we have this disconnection with nature. We are part of nature, but an animal like the limpet creates the teeth from local materials available, but we're not doing that. We're always sourcing something that is far away. We're always trying to kind of fight against something that is already out there. And this is something that we need to implement and become more responsible, implement it into our practice, and adapt to certain materials that might not be very strong, or something that it doesn't have a clear purpose yet. Because we don't know things like how nature works and the systems, and we need to start learning about these practices and how nature creates these processes. And we can take a lot from that, and try to become more positive of how we're designing and producing and disposing,
consuming as well,
and the disassembling of materials as well, which is something that not many people think about.
Yeah, I have to agree with Karina. Also, I think there's a kind of responsibility of designers to inform about the material. And well, you can say that it's every consumer's responsibility to choose sustainable materials, but I think designers have even bigger role in this, because those are the people who actually put out items out there that choose the materials that things are made of. Before they actually reach the consumers. So definitely kind of all designers are responsible for making the right choice of the material.
And also because we always think of the aesthetics of the products that we create as designers, but we always think of the beginning of a process. Well, not anymore. We're starting to change that. But as well as thinking at the aesthetics and how we create these products, we also simultaneously, we have to start creating the ending of these products, of these materials, and where they're going, and inform people.
Yeah. I think that's really great, because it touches on another question that I wanted to ask you, which is sort of obviously what you're saying, and what you've all explored in your projects is that actually it's not only about designing a material or a material composite, it's about designing the whole system behind the material. Yeah. Do you think that biomaterials are one of the solutions to making our material cycles less detrimental to the environment? And if so, why?
Nature is the ultimate designer. At the end of the day, there is the complexity of these systems has been worked out through evolution for billions of years. But these technologies are hidden, and not many people have access, to these technologies. And this is something that we can. I lost the question. Sorry.
I think obviously, material sustainability is very much at the core of all of the three of these projects, right? And I think a lot of conversation, especially Rina, you touch a lot on the circular economy in your project, and looking at keeping things within a loop, and sort of keeping things very close and very local, and just speaking purely of materials out there. I know that's just really broad, but I think maybe, and bringing it back to your own projects, do you feel that the materials that you've been exploring could be a good solution in terms of keeping things that you can always keep in the same loop, or that they can decompose at the end of life?
Yeah, I think it's very important to make the materials easily compostable, because people are quite lazy in terms of recycling or figuring out how to get rid of their things. So yeah, Karina, I think, was saying designing the end of the life of the product into the whole life cycle from the very beginning.
And also, I think choosing the appropriate materials for each thing that you're creating is super important. Like sometimes it might not be a biomaterial that you need really, but when you're thinking like plastic, there's some things that plastic is like genuinely okay for and has the best functionality, but is it the best thing for packaging or for stuff that's going to get thrown out, like any fashion, things like that. So I think that's important to think about. Yeah.
And I get really excited when I think of the work that you guys have been doing, and I think at the end of the day you guys have made really amazing projects, and sort of you give a view into sort of a new world of possibilities. And like Sarah, you talk about using biomaterials that can compete with synthetics that are super strong, and so does Carolina. Rina, you talk so much about working locally and sort of just taking the waste from a specific waste stream and utilizing it in a way that you turn it into a product that can actually be decomposed at the end of the day. So this all sounds very exciting, but I just wonder, in terms of scalability, obviously we talk a lot about how the industry isn't ready sometimes to adopt these changes. When do you think that's going to happen? Is that something that's going to be in the short term, long term?
I think it's already happening in some spaces. I mean, biotech has been around for a lot longer than right now when it's being really sort of talked about a lot. I think now is a special time because we have different tools that we never had before, like synthetic biology and computational design, things like that. So it's like, I was listening to this podcast, I can't remember what it was, but this guy kind of described what's going on right now as like in the 80s with the personal computer, how it was like, so you would never think that what we have today, like our phones in our pockets and like every single person has a computer, all this stuff, like it was so different only, I don't know how long ago that was, 50 years, I guess now. So things are just like radically, I think technology is allowing things to radically shift, which is going to help with scalability. But in the end, like for something, it's biology that we're working with. So you can't totally control everything. Some things aren't going to have the exact same, be able to reproduce it exactly over and over again. And so maybe that's also shifting sort of our expectations of what these living systems are producing for us and how we sort of our relationship with objects and what we're using it for. And then I also think that we can't just fall back into the same sort of system of production that we're doing now and feeding these bacteria and things that we're creating with. They need nutrients, they need inputs, like there's still stuff going in. So if we're feeding them with sugars that we've now had to continue deforestation to grow, like we have to just make sure that we're not falling back into the same cycle that we are right now, just because it seems like a greener and less environmentally impactful solution. It still can, if we continue to just not pay attention, it can give us the same problems we have now, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like in my project, that one of the questions that I had when I started, it was how a biomaterial can be scalable, and how working with living organisms can be volatile. It's difficult to control. Sarah, you had problems with the temperature of your bacteria, and that's something that is just so hard. And that's why, although my project is not quite based at this point in living organisms, I use dead materials, but inspired in the mineralization of the mollusk. Mm-hmm. So, like studying the morphology and how the action material is mineralized, that might give us information on how the system works and how we can create these processes in that same way. So perhaps studying the parametric data of how these systems work, we might be able to introduce this into other materials, and that way being able to design also the end life of the products, or reinforce others. But it's just so many things to learn about biomimicry that I just love, and it's just amazing. I love the work you do, guys.
There's so many in nature, so many materials that, and in the end, are very different. But when you break it down, the ingredients that they has gone into it are really similar. Like mine and Carolina's, there is really similarities between like what's going in to make this thing. So that's like another thing we can take from nature, is like they're creating these like super innovative and intricate designs, and they're using minimum amount of ingredients, really low energy expenditure, and creating like such a variety of different material properties with it. So yeah, learning from it and implementing it in other ways, not necessarily always using living organisms, is also really interesting.
Yeah. And I guess maybe over to you. I think you focus a lot, maybe Carolina not so much, but there seems to be a big focus sort of on the fashion industry in both Rina and Sarah's projects. Sarah, you talk about sportswear, which is, it's quite mass produced. Rina, you talk about making bags, which you can do high-end bags that are more locally produced and in smaller scale. Do you think that, would you be able to make this project a reality in the next 10 years, where you partner up with, I don't know, a designer or a lab, and you would start producing the objects that you have suggested through your work? Do you think that's something that's doable? Are we there yet, really?
I mean, 10 years is a long time. So yeah, 10 years, yes. But I think for me, there's I chose sportswear because you can really show the functionality of the material. I really wanted to get it across that this is like a highly technical performance material, but it could easily be a button or embellishments or things that a cell phone case, like things that are more, I guess, less highly technical, but it just could work for like a wider range. I just wanted to give sportswear so you understand like the full technicality of this material. But yeah, 10 years for sure. I think yes.
Because if I'm right in saying this, I think and with all of you, this was the conversation always, is time an issue? Is time sort of the biggest challenge? Because obviously you need to grow it and it takes time. Do you think that is the big challenge to overcome for these things to happen?
Time, as in the length of time it would take me to produce something using this technique. It is quite a bit because it grows very slowly. But I think time, I need time of still continuing to develop how the best way to create this material in the shapes and forms that I want it, and to have the right sort of ready for production. Like that's a whole different topic, and that's like a few years away for sure. But yeah, the time is, it takes a long time to produce something. So, and you can't change biology really. So if I'm going to continue in this specific technique of it, it's understandably that whatever I'm growing is going to take months. So yes, that might be an issue. But
I see something related to that, and it's an element of luxury, but in a different way. Because behind the production of these materials and these products, there is so much time and research done by these designers, and all of that should have a value as well, that we can start. Not necessarily we need to mass produce. I think if we kind of start giving value to these amazing materials and objects, we wouldn't need we wouldn't have the need to create so much and just love what we have. We don't have to. We have to get away of this culture of consuming so much and appreciating more why we're making this work. So perhaps the timing is not. It might not be that far away if if these materials start to become more and more popular, I guess.
Rina, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I guess in my project, time plays a little different role, because initially I was growing the material myself, but pretty soon I switched to working with the byproduct of kombucha production industry. So it's already being grown as part of the kombucha drink production. And I don't need to really spend time waiting for it to develop. It's rather like collecting their byproducts and reprocessing it. I guess in my case, what plays a bigger role is having more kombucha production like going on. Because right now it's still quite niche drink, but the popularity is rising. So why not in the future? And also, although within I was collaborating with Loughborough University, and in my during the lockdown in my own studio, I managed to develop quite decent quality material to be produced on a larger scale. Of course, it still needs this final push, and I feel that I need to collaborate with a lab for that. So I'm currently actually looking for a lab to take this further, if anyone's listening.
Just putting it out there. Nice. And then I think maybe touching back, we kind of touched on this earlier on in the conversation, but I think, all of your projects, mostly, Carolina and Sarah, Rina, you were kind of flying solo at the beginning and doing things in the studio, if I remember correctly, but you did depend very much on scientific support, and you had professional scientific labs, and you started working off in this area, and then the pandemic happened and you had to go home and move and shift to a DIY model, which is not always ideal when you're working with bacteria and with living organisms. So how did you overcome those challenges? I'm curious to know what that experience looked like.
Crying. Crying. No. Well, yeah, but and then like I said, just you have to get resourceful and creative, and I kind of got into I don't know, it changed my perspective on what equipment is, and I changed things that had a completely different purpose into something that was helping me grow this in my house. So and different coding and electrical things that I had never thought I would really be doing. I was doing so it really shifted what I needed to create, because those things are available to you in a lab and I didn't need it in my house. But so that was the beginning, I guess. And it was stinky, to be honest. Bacteria gives off odors. Well, it depends which one, but mine does. And it was weird sort of figuring out how to properly dispose of things when I just have my sinks and stuff. So it was a really big learning experience for me. But it was cool in the end. I feel way more capable, and it broke down the barrier of feeling so removed from science, and that I wasn't it can be really daunting being in a lab when you don't have scientific background. So this was me in my own space, sort of learning at my own pace and understanding I can do this, and it doesn't have to be exactly this person who's trained in science. I can do it too. So I felt that was a good experience. But yeah, I don't know about you guys. Carolina.
I was at first devastated because I had the opportunity to work with scientists from Imperial College, and I got entry into the laboratories just a few days before the lockdown. So I was like, this is like unbelievable. But luckily, the scientists I was working with, they were super supportive, and they were like, okay, we can do this. We're gonna do this using Zoom. So we had meetings, planning how we could make this in a different way. And so this forced me to rethink the way I was designing myself. So the process for me was to go to the laboratories at Imperial College, making a bioreactor, 3D printing it by using a traditional filament and 3D printing the parts of the bioreactor so I could do my experiments. Obviously, during the lockdown, I had to adapt all of these systems. So instead of, I didn't have access to a 3D printer. So I started to look through my bins and see what I could adapt into plastic that I already had in my everyday bins, things from like the lids from the carton milk, the milk, and things like that I could adapt in like similar sizes. And then I started to research how to put some of the plastic that was in my bin. I managed and things I found in my house, and I managed to make a bioreactor using only what was around me, which was really like the basics of what I am trying to inspire all the designers to do. I ended up like doing. So at the beginning it was quite sad, but it turned into an incredible opportunity to experience being able to work with only what you have around and trying to source local materials. So it turned out good in a way. Yeah.
And Rina, for you, how was that? Because obviously your project shifted a bit, like you were saying that you started off growing your own SCOBY, and then eventually it turned very much into a collaborative project where you source the byproduct from kombucha. How would you call it? Kombucha factories, kombucha brewers,
kombucha brewery.
So yeah, for you, how was that experience during the pandemic and during lockdown? Did you have to resort to growing it again yourself, or did you just have enough material?
Well, actually, it didn't change that much because I had stocked up on all the ingredients like before the lockdown started. And I had like 20 kilos of SCOBY in my studio.
Wow.
that I just was working through. In that way, I think the lockdown proved to me that like you can actually. Sure, I have like a dehydrator and some like, specific equipment, but it's not that special that somebody starting out at home can actually do it with a bit of research. And dehydrator really helps. So I guess what my experience taught me is that this can be done at home as well. And I'd like to bring this awareness to more people. Because a lot of people like disconnect with the material making process if they don't have like related background. So pandemic saw the growth of home bakers. There was no flour in the supermarkets, which I also use in my recipe. Then I guess that affected me a bit. But at the same way, people could embrace creating materials at home. And I think through different workshops that I'm also occasionally running, it's a great way to introduce different possibilities to people. And that's like Sarah and Carolina were saying, you can actually create a whole lab at home. So I think that's the message for other starting up designers that it's possible.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask you one more question, and then we'll let the public start sending questions. So if anyone has any questions, you can start sending them in the chat, and then I will read them over to these guys. Yeah, I guess, it sounds, obviously it sounds really terrifying, but then I feel like you guys have all overcome it. And maybe there is a big takeaway from this, because, teaching on material futures, I often see that there's so many students that want to get into biodesign. They want to start growing things in a lab. They want to start working with bacteria, and they're often very frustrated, and it's very difficult for them because they don't have access to these labs. It's quite restricted. It takes time to build those relationships with, different colleges around London, around the UK. Do you think that this DIY model is doable? Would you encourage, students that are starting to look into these topics? Is that something that you feel can actually be a model that exists in the future? Or it's already, obviously it exists in a lot of different spaces here in London, but is that a takeaway from your projects, that you feel that, you should encourage more DIY biodesign?
Yeah, 100%. Like I said before, like some has to be done in a lab, like it just does, but there's so much that you can do at home. And when you're doing things at home, you're kind of like removed from the pressure of justifying a project or funding or working for a client, where when you're working in an institutional lab, that's really what you're there for. So you just are kind of like experimenting and learning just for the sake of knowledge and curiosity. And I think that will also lend to you being a better biodesigner when you do get access to the labs and things, because you've had hands-on experience that even like sometimes scientists that are working in the lab, like you're buying these sterile strains from like a database, and you're not understanding. I mean, I don't know. You get a whole knowledge of how to work with these bacteria or fungi or whatever you're working with. And actually, like you can find them just outside. Like I got some pigment bacteria from my garden. I just got soil from it, and I managed to isolate 2 different like colors of pigments from these bacteria. And you can get mycelium from mushrooms outside, and slime molds and things like that. So it forces you to be more resourceful, but in the end, it's like allowing you to be a better designer when you do get into the labs. So yeah.
Yeah, and I guess what Material Futures course taught me is that you don't need to have like scientific background to start working with these projects, like all of us have proved. And I guess that's what I would like also to put out there for more people to kind of not be put off by the white coats of the scientists, like Sarah said.
Yeah, but it is also really important when you're trying to sort through this to build relationships with people in the scientific community. Like my first expert advisor on the first biodesign project that I did, Megan, she works at the British Geological Survey, and she's helped me through from first year until now. We still chat about all my projects. She gives advice on how I'm finding these like wild bacteria. She we just chat about all kinds of stuff. So building real relationships in the science community is really helpful. Even when you just have a question that you can't find on the internet, like it's important to build those, but you can also really do so much at home. You don't need to lean on them as much as you would think in the original starting.
And also it fuels your creativity when you're at home as well. Sometimes accidents can lead to other to the creation of other materials and things that maybe because you didn't have enough knowledge in a particular subject, you might be able to create something amazing that unintended, as long as you always keep track of your experiments and write everything down. Also, it kind of puts you more in touch with like nature as well. Like you can go out and start exploring outside the lab, and that in itself is a wonderful experience to close this gap between nature and humans.
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's very clear that collaboration is so important. You can obviously do things on your own, but especially when it becomes so transdisciplinary that you're mixing your knowledge and design, and like you're sort of entering a completely new sphere. And I mean, I come from a family of biologists. My mom is a biologist, my brother's a biologist, and I often realize how much you need to learn, and it's not only about like the just getting the technicalities of things. It's actually the processes as well, and like just when you set your foot in lab for the first time, you need to learn a completely new set of rules, and it's very different. So I think it's so exciting for us, and yeah, I guess like one thing to take away from all of your projects is that you have really been able to collaborate to the point where you've been able to bring that knowledge to your own homes. And I think I know it's been super tough for you guys, and I followed you when you were graduating, but it gives me a lot of energy and a lot of like hope in a way, like that you're able to do that. And I think, I mean, you both are like the three of you are like super tough fighting females. And I think, lockdown happened, you were like, I'm still going to do my project. So, which is really, really amazing. So I guess if you did have a word of advice for, the new students that are going to Material Futures and any students that are going into design, because obviously, unfortunately, I think we're going to be facing quite tough measures because of the pandemic once again. What would that word of advice be?
I would say, like, I think personally, my project, I would have chosen something different if I knew how I would be actually doing it. Like, not that I'm not interested in the same thing or working with bacteria, but just in a different way that lends itself more to the equipment that I was able to build and all that stuff. So I think if you're thinking of your project right now, base it in the fact that you're going to be at home, and you can do a lot of amazing things at home, but there, like we were saying before, there's so much bio design that you can do really well and you don't need a lab, and there's so much that it's really not going to be as successful if you're not able to access the equipment and the experts and things like that. So maybe base your project in something you can do really well at home, and all the learning and all of that's your base for then after taking it to the lab and building on that, and coming up with something really amazing. And just like try everything and go get back to your garden, because it's so crazy what you can do on your own.
Rina?
Yeah, I have to agree with Sarah. That definitely, like, especially people who start the course this year, who knows what next day brings, have to think how to manage it in case of further lockdown. And maybe also when choosing a project to think like, what has this pandemic taught us? What is especially needed at this day and age? Perhaps it has created new needs or new gaps to pay attention to, new issues to look at.
For me, it would be more than worrying about, you have to worry about your projects and how you choose them, but also to keep something in mind is to start thinking of humans and how we are going to be interacting with our products and services, and how can we start designing around these unexpected situations in the world, but also understanding how we can, as humans, adapt and inspire, other designers and your classmates. That's amazing.
Yeah, I also think collaboration between each other, like when we had like the studio, and we would just feed off each other, be able to talk about, you'd walk by, see somebody's project and be like, oh, that's amazing. You take some inspiration, or you talk through like what you're doing, and you really lose that when you're in lockdown. So if you can somehow create like more community sharing between each other and helping each other out. Like it's crazy how much that changed, like just the way that I was working when I would be able to turn around and talk to someone, or I was alone in my house. So
yeah, I have to emphasize that, Sarah. Yeah, that's so important that you create groups where you can chat and do like creates between yourselves as well. It's super important to see other people's perspectives. You also get to learn so much about your classmates, and you definitely inspire each other. That's super important. Don't I went through that in closing myself a little bit, and that is not healthy at all. That's not good. No.
So I will read you the questions that the public has written down. If there are any more, please just shoot them over in the chat. The first one actually leads very much into what you just said. So are there any steps you can suggest to new entrepreneurs and in the biodesign era? For example, are there any international communities and co-learning facilitations that they can join?
There's a lot of DIY bio communities. If you just Google DIY bio, there's like you can go to the site and there's a map that just shows you like all across the world. So there's a lot of things like on YouTube or Instructables on people who are doing similar things. There's communities for if you're into Mycelium, there's like mushroom communities. And like no matter what you're into, other people are going to be into it. You just have to find the right group. So I would like suggest searching online for whatever it is. Like there's algae groups, like there's everything. But something that I'm working on developing right now is a bit in tune with that, and it would be sort of an open source database of bacteria and microorganisms that designers can work with, and the scientists that are working with these ones, and basically just like how to work more cohesively between the two, science and design, and there'll be some resources and things like that coming. So stay tuned for that.
And in the kombucha realm, is there anything that you would recommend, Rina, in terms of networks?
Well, I just have to agree with what Sarah said, and also like Instagram, there are a lot of like connections coming through there.
All right. Next question is, I would like to start a personal project by applying biomimicry biotech to create textiles specifically for the sports industry. What are your thoughts / ideas? And this talk is great, so just wanted to put it out there.
Thank you.
I think like there's such a variety of what all of those things mean that when you're talking, like it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is that I guess they're looking to develop, but there's so much literature and things to read about that are exploring the biomimicry in textiles and in fashion or whatever you're looking for. So there's a lot of books out there that you'll just read and it's like amazing, and then give you inspiration to research that further. So I guess find what it is that you're looking. If it's a textile, what are you trying to get this textile to do? And then can you find anything in nature that does that naturally already, and then take from that and implement it in your designs?
Yeah, and I think also maybe like narrowing down once you know what you want to achieve, like really like narrowing down what exactly is it that you're looking for, rather than having it like too open. I mean, initially it's good, but once you know more in detail.
And also start looking into scientific papers of topics that are related to what you have in mind, and then you can start looking at the work that scientists are doing right now, and definitely don't be afraid of contacting scientists, or they might not get back to you because but you can also try PhD students. They always a little bit more available than other scientists, and they can also are more willing to collaborate as well. So, and also networking with the science community. That's something that I strongly advise.
And just reach out to anyone that's already working in this area. Like, I think there is a bit among biodesigners of like keeping things to yourself, but I personally think that everyone should be sharing as much as they can with each other, because we're only going to make our projects better by getting different perspectives, different ideas, learning from each other. So just reach out to people and go for, I guess you can't really go for coffee anymore, but do a little virtual coffee or something.
Yeah.
But when you're emailing experts and scientists and stuff, like you have to set like hundreds of emails, like hundreds out, and you'll get like 5 replies maybe, and then you'll find your one that's you're going to be your best bacteria friend. So,
but also make your project, like your pitching ideas, interesting, and not so much approaching people to just like only take knowledge from them, but also show that you have something that you can contribute to their research. And that is super important, because that's how you get people's interest to collaborate with you. So that's a tip.
Yeah, and I also think, I think things have changed a lot in terms of the view that maybe scientists have of the design community, because I know at the beginning it's not easy to tap into that, but I think more and more these relationships are building over time, and I think like the scientific community is really starting to see the value of like working with designers and kind of embedding designers at the beginning of their process. So I think it is a great time to sort of start building those relationships.
Definitely.
Yeah. Let me see. I think we don't have any more questions. If anyone has one last question, just write it in the chat. Otherwise, we're gonna have to finish. Maybe I'll just ask you one. What are the next steps of your projects? No, I shouldn't ask that question. But what are you gonna do next, guys?
I definitely had to take a break from. I was a bit like exhausted of this project by the end of the MA, but I'm excited to eventually start getting back into it and seeing how I can how far I can develop this in an actual lab instead of trying to get it at home. And also, like last year, I was working with the same bacteria that I'm working with now, but instead of using it in a composite, I was just using it to grow the calcite crystals. So that's something that at home I can continue to do. It's not as technical. So I'm looking at playing with that on different surfaces and fabrics and things like that.
For me, would be to keep experimenting with mineralizing my material. But what I am more excited at the moment is the study of the parametric data of the process and the system of how this material is produced, and try to take the data to build structures that I can use with other biomaterials. So, because I see most of biomaterials that are available to the public are quite weak, not resistant enough. So maybe the information that I can get from this process can perhaps help enhancing the properties of other biomaterials. So that's my next step.
Yeah, and I've had some interest towards my materials, so kind of continuing with those collaborations and experiments, and also, as I mentioned before, looking for a lab to actually give it push to another level.
Yeah, we're looking for funding, and that's very important. That will help actually a lot to help us to continue with our research, because that's something that in my case, I wish I had more time and more resources to keep my research going. So yeah, that'd be amazing.
So if there are any investors out there, please let these guys know. Okay, last question. Really good one. Kind of going back to the topic of collaboration with the scientific community. So how do you deal with your non-scientific background, and have you encountered any issues with that?
I've gotten some, like this one scientist that I had reached out to, and we were talking, and I had sort of talked about what I was looking to do, and that my background is in fashion, and I got sort of you're not going to understand this. Like, I don't know why we're talking. You're not going to be able to get this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I mean, I've already done some biodesign and read your papers. I do understand what we're talking about. Like, come on, give me some credit here. So there's been like a bit of that, but in general, I think that scientists are creative as well. And a lot of the times their work is sort of preset for them, what they're researching on their projects and things, but they are interested just in the excitement and curiosity of biology. So when you're bringing these like new perspectives and trying to get them involved as well, like they get excited about it too. So I think you're going to get some resistance from some people, but like they're not the ones that you want to work with anyways. You want to work with the fun ones who are open-minded and like sort of interested in what you're interested in. So
yeah, also because scientists are quite secretive with the research, might come across as they don't want to share too much, but I think if you go prepared, like if you definitely there is a lot of literature online and libraries, online libraries that you can access to prepare yourself and study your topic inside out. So when you're having conversations with scientists, you are familiar with the terminology and the processes, and then from there you can just start talking about the actual collaboration and how you can take your project further.
And talking about what you don't understand when they say something and you don't understand, like a lot of the times I had just been like, I get it, but really that wasn't helping me at all, and we weren't on the same page, you know what I mean? So when you say I don't understand what you mean, even if it's a word that you get, but the context is completely different sometimes between design and science. So talking about those things will then allow you to actually understand what each other are talking about and get somewhere real, instead of both kind of pretending like, yeah, I get what you're saying, but I don't really understand why we're doing this, or that sort of thing.
Yeah. Besides mycelium, this is another question, by the way. Besides mycelium, I haven't come across many promising biomaterial initiatives. For furniture, do you happen to know of any good communities or interesting projects / binders in this area? So for structural purposes. Thanks.
Well, the bacteria that I'm working with, the one that creates the mineral, it is also being used in things like biocements and to like calcify aggregates. And I did see one guy who made a sand stool out of it. So you can create, like, instead of concretes, you can create something similar using this bacteria and then different aggregates. So that's somewhere I think that would be interesting to look into more, what you can calcify with this bacteria and how strong that can be. I also saw a stool made out of bacteria cellulose, which is what Rena's working with. And a designer had sort of built a frame and then submerged it into a bioreactor, which literally is just a container where the reaction and the growth happens. Like, it sounds like such a crazy word, but it could be anything. So you put it in there, and then the bacteria were growing that biofilm around the frame, which created sort of like a leather-ish covering on it. So that was interesting.
Nice. Okay, I think we're gonna wrap it up for today. So thank you so much, the three of you. It's been really good to see you again. I haven't seen these guys in person for a very long time. So hopefully we will be able to catch up soon, and I can hear more about your projects in person. But yeah, in the meantime, go check out Dutch Design Week website, where you will see their work under the United Matters page. And we're gonna join again tomorrow with 4 other students, I think, and we're gonna talk about crafts and processes with Maria, Giuseppe, Josh, and Florencia at 6 o'clock UK time tomorrow. So yeah, thanks so much, guys. I'm really excited to see what's coming next. And the audience is applauding you. I don't know if you can see the comments, but everyone says that they're very happy with this talk. And hopefully we can do another talk later in the future. It'd be super nice to catch up again.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks so much. Have a
Thank you,
lovely
Marta,
weekend.
for curating this.
No worries. I wish it could be in person, but yeah, we just have to do it digital for now.
Everything, yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna disconnect the stream. Bye, guys.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
And